So now I want to show you some troubleshooting tips and some other strategies that we hadn't covered. So I pulled up here a decision guide for iPad that the VIAT team that I'm on, we had put together this past fall in 2019. And we had thought, I had revised it even in, I think, December or January. We thought what we had was an accessible form, but after doing much research on accessibility, I've learned this is not accessible for the purposes that we wanted it to be used for. So our purpose was that we would send it to teachers, that they would be able to electronically fill it in and then submit it back to us. If this was printed out, the teachers would be able to fill in each of the sections, but we wanted ones to be able to fill it out electronically. So the first thing I noticed is I had put student name, TVI requesting, and date in the header. And what I've learned is that screen readers cannot access that information. So I would have to pull the student name, TVI, and the date and put that into the body of the document. The other thing is that we wanted this to be a fillable form and to be filled as checkboxes. But look, we had put it into tables, and I realized the error in that is it did not need to be in a table format. That just complicates it for screen readers. So visually, if you're looking at it, it might look organized, but for a screen reader, it is just a nightmare to fill this out. So the other thing, we wanted this to be boxes where you would just check yes or no, and then you could write information at the end where you would summarize it. But this was just to be check boxes. But because we don't have boxes there, it is being read as a text box. So when we convert it into PDF, it is not going to read it as a box, and it's not going to fill it in the way that we want it to. Now you could say, well, why don't you use developer? And so if I went to the developer and I went to the check boxes and I said, okay, well, I'll go ahead and put check boxes there. One of the reasons I don't typically use developer and just have Word documents is because one of the other things that I learned is that there viruses can be attached to Word documents where they can't be attached to PDF documents. So you might not know that you have a virus and you could be sending it off to somebody. So it's best to email PDF documents. So let's go ahead, I'm going to leave those there because when we go to fill it in the PDF and prepare forms that way, you're going to see how it doesn't check those correctly anyhow. So let's go ahead and save. And we're going to save it as PDF, but I'm not going to save it using the save as PDF because look at the minimum options when I do save it this way. It just has file name and save as type, but I want to make sure I have more information included, and it's just a way of double checking. So I go to file and I save as. I always go to browse so I can make sure where I'm saving it so I don't have to go try to find it later. Save as type, PDF. And so now here's where I can double check, because you're going to come across with errors if you don't have author, title, especially those two items filled in. It's good to have your subject too. So why don't I just put, for the subject is going to be VIAT as our subject. But if you don't have those items filled in, it will flag and it will fail the accessibility check in PDF. The other thing we want to do is we want to go to options, and we want to make sure document structure tags for accessibility. We want to make sure that box is checked. So we select OK. We save it as a PDF. All right, so we're going to now have to go find it. Let's open that up. All right, here is our decision guide. So the first thing you always want to do is to check your accessibility. So I'm going and I'm checking accessibility. Panel opens up. And I'm going to run a full check. All those boxes are checked off. And perfect. You only want to see those two. You're always going to have those two issues, but you shouldn't have any others. So the reason those two come up is because they need a manual check for logical reading order and color contrast. So we know right now it passes accessibility, even though for our purposes it does not. So next we want to go to tools, and we want to prepare the form. So we scroll up and it's under forms and signature, prepare form. We don't have any signatures, So we're just going to click Start, and it automatically fills it in. And highlighted, you'll see the different fields that have been filled in. So it has the student name, all those are text boxes. It has an extra one here next to student considerations, but we didn't want anybody to fill anything out there, so that would need to be deleted. Now, see on the first question where we entered those boxes in Word, it did not just automatically convert those to check boxes. And the ones where we didn't fill it in, it has it where it's a text field. We don't want a text field for it, so we would have to go through manually and delete all those areas, and that is just a pain. It kind of takes away the benefits of using a wizard. So for each one, we would have to come up in the choice, and we would pick on checkbox, and we would drag it down, and for each one then we would have to give it a field name. So I'd have to write yes, the student is able to use accessibility features on an iPad. And then for no, the student is not. Or you could have a no right afterwards, and you need to check your reading order. But I'm not even going to go any further because that is very tedious, and that is not an effective way to do it. So we're going to close out. No, I don't even want to save it. Now, I have put together a revised iPad decision guide where you can see I have put the student name, TVI requesting, date. That is in the body of the text now. Let's get rid of that little extra space there. Just clean that up a little bit. I'm going to give it a little bit more cushion. There we go. All right, so print access, student considerations, those are all, look at our styles, they're all heading 1. We've got our title, and instead of having it within a table, I have each question listed, and immediately afterwards I have yes checkbox, no checkbox. And so that's going to be much easier to convert to the wizard. So now let's go ahead and let's save this one since I made that little change. And we're going to save as, browse, and I'm going to keep that name, Revised iPad Decision Guide, saving it as a PDF. Just double check and make sure that box is checked under options, that it's tagged. Okay, now we're going to save it. Let's go ahead and open it up. Revised iPad Decision Guide. There it is. And again, always go to, you want to check accessibility and just make sure, run a full check, start checking, pops up, and it's good. Just those 2 issues, logical reading order and color contrast. So now, close that out. We want to prepare our form. So we go up to prepare form under forms and signatures, start that. Okay, so now it's filled it in for us. Now I would want to go through and just make sure each field is filled out correctly, but to save time, I'm not going to go through that right now. Okay, and so now every time you make a change to the form, and we did because we made it a fillable form, once again we have to run the accessibility checker because we've made changes. So we're going to do a full check. And we'll see that those 2 errors came up, which is fine, but look, we have a new error. When we click on the arrow, it says tagged form fields failed. So we have to re-tag it. So the first option that is on the right-hand side in that panel under accessibility is auto tag the document. When I click on it, it says the document is already tagged. Would you like to re-tag it? We've made changes to it. So let's go ahead and re-tag it. Okay, close out of the recognition report, and now let's go ahead and run the accessibility check. Start checking. So now we've passed the tagged form fields, but we've got another error. And now in headings. So this is just the process of troubleshooting. You're not always going to have this problem. Elements. So now I look at it and I'm like, why is it now all of a sudden there's a problem with the print access heading? So I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to go to show in the content panel because I want to inspect it and see what the problem is. So when I go up to the decision guide, let's start with that one. And text field, okay, there it is. I'm going to right click on it. What are the properties of it? When I look at the tag, it says heading level 1. All right, so I close out of that. So what's the problem with print access? So I go ahead and I click on print access, and I'm going to go to properties, right clicking, go to tag, heading level 3. It changed the heading level. And remember, that was one of the things that we had discussed with the heading levels, is you can't skip heading levels or a screen reader is going to think that they've missed information. So we need to go back through and change that to heading level 2. And I have a feeling the other one, student considerations, that's going to be heading level 3. It would pass accessibility at this point because now it's like a tree. It has heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, but that's not a level 3. That's at the same level, and so it should be the same. So I'm going to go ahead and look for student considerations. Found it. I'm going to right click, go to properties, and I'm just going to correct each of those headings so that they're at the correct level. Scrolling down, so now we need to go find page 2. All right, so I'm clicking on page 2, and so the first thing will be the environmental considerations. Right click, properties, tag it. Yep, it's heading level 3. I want to change that to 2. Now let's go find iPad features. Right click properties, tag it, level 2. And I think there's one more, outcomes. We want to change outcomes. Where did outcomes go? There it is. Okay. And we want to change that to a 2. Close. Let's close out of there. Now let's check if we pass accessibility this time. All right, so we're going to start checking, and we did it. And it's always such a good feeling when you pass accessibility. And so now the only 2 issues that we have are the logical reading order and the color contrast, which we visually check, and we know that that is, we manually check it, we know it's good. So we're going to save, and we want to give this a unique name. So we don't want to print it. Save as. All right, let me go find my file that I was in. And instead of revised iPad decision guide, because I might want to go back in it and I might not always want to have the fillable, and I want to make sure this one is saved as fillable. So I have both ones that are available. Save. And so now we have a completely accessible fillable form.